Hi, I'm James Eade, and welcome to Roar, episode 6. We've got a lot to roar about today, and I'm going to bring in Rick Rosner. Hi, Rick.
Hello.
Rick and I have been talking once a week about what we need to do to speak up and speak out to preserve our democracy. Because when citizens are afraid to speak up, they're not living in a democracy. They're living in an autocratic society where they're afraid that there will be repercussions for speaking their minds. And I think there's strength in numbers. What do you think, Rick? If enough people speak out, they can't do too much to all of us. Or are we jeopardizing our freedom by speaking up and speaking out?
A little of both. Our country is so big geographically and in terms of population that, and there's so much going on that, yeah, a lot of people can speak out and we have strength in numbers, but voices get lost in the confusion. Trump, not a smart guy, not a good guy. But he has a strategic strength, and he's just a loudmouth, and he just is chaotic, and he just does a ton of stuff, and all the chaos around him serves to distract from all the other chaos around him.
That's an excellent point. We've talked about that. It seems like there was a time when Obama was running again, and Trump accused him of. He said he would start a war in Iran to distract people from to reelect him, and Obama didn't do that, but Trump did.
Yeah.
And so it's a distraction in some ways. But with this special or strategic military operation, we're not supposed to call it a war, but it was a war of choice because only Congress can declare war. But he's using the executive branch in ways that no other president has. A president could declare war in a time of emergency if we were struck, for example, in Pearl Harbor. But it's Congress's purview. And the Supreme Court is now telling Trump he can't just unilaterally assign tariffs to countries. It's the purview of Congress. Congress holds the
I just saw a survey this morning that says that 52% of Americans think that that Trump started the war at least in part to distract from the Epstein files.
Yeah.
And
there was something like 50,000 documents that were held back by the DOJ.
No, 3 million.
3 million.
Yes. There's still millions of documents and other pieces of evidence that have been held back.
Well, that's shocking to me. 50,000 was enough to get my attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's it's a sensitive question, but people have had to resign in other countries because of being associated with Epstein. And Trump certainly was. And, he's, doing what he can to distract us from that, to suppress the information from getting out. And how involved was he, and what were the quid pro quo arrangements between the two of them? And certainly we can speculate, and with some degree of confidence that there was. But the war of choice going into Iran doing this strategic bombing. He was advised by his military that there would be no way to militarily reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. So they were advising against it, but he did it anyways, and now he's begging them to use a military solution to reopen it. And they're saying, that's just not something that is so easily done. And he's begging other countries, the EU, Japan, to come in and help. And you form a coalition of allies, like President Bush did for the first Gulf War. It was like
Gulf War I in 1991. The first President Bush, 30 countries, overwhelming force. The ground war lasted 4 days.
And that the idea is you form the coalition before you act. You don't act unilaterally and then ask for that coalition. So
the Strait of Hormuz is part of the 800-mile-long southern coast of Iran, and I mean they own the entire, the the northern shore of the Persian Gulf, the Strait, and the Gulf of Oman. And the idea that you could stop them from doing everything, I mean, they can fire missiles from land, they can fire torpedoes from the sea, they can, it's a length of coast, the length of California, which it would be, it's hard to protect against a long, it's a long distance.
And they're putting mines in as well, from what I'm understanding. But they're offering other Gulf countries safe passage. I'm not sure how you do that when you mine it, but unless you give them the information of where the mines are. But all that information can be stolen. But the idea that I'm struggling with is, what is the end game? When do you declare victory? Now, Trump has done it already more than once. But there is no victory, and we don't know what victory looks like in this case.
Well, there are two objectives that are reasonable in this. One is tipping over the regime so that the people of Iran replace the Islamic rulers with some government that's less repressive. And a number of experts plus common sense suggest that that's unlikely. Plus the betting markets. Nobody is buying that this is a likely event.
Right.
Objective 2 is shutting down Iran's program to develop nuclear weapons. And taking away, they've got about 1,000 pounds, according to experts, of 60% enriched uranium. The trouble is that would easily fit in the bed of a pickup truck. It in terms of volume, if you took 15 footballs, it would fit within 15 footballs. And in a country that's 2.5 times the size of Texas. So it would be easy to hide, split it up and to hide it a bunch of places. It's radioactive, so it has a signature, but the way you stop that is you just wrap it in lead to catch all those stray radiation. So unless you have spies who know exactly where it is, it's very hard to find. But stopping Iran has a nuclear program. It has two parts. One is the nuclear bombs. The other is the means of launching the nuclear bombs, missiles. So we could probably screw up their missile program. We can force them to shoot off a bunch of their missiles. They don't have the technology to launch missiles from Iran to the U.S.
Right. So this seems like more of an Israeli problem, and you can see why Israeli was interested in that more so than the U.S.
So there's a New York Times article that says on February 11th, Netanyahu spent 3 hours talking to Trump, talking him into going to war. And we know from just his whole history, he often acts based on the last person he talked to. If you can get in the Oval Office, if you can, he's persuadable.
Right. Yeah, if you can get his ear, and also, I think he's got some admiration for Netanyahu, just as he has some admiration for Putin. He thinks that he wants to act like that. And as I've been saying, instead of exporting democratic values, which presidents prior to Trump have been doing, he's importing czarist values, where he can be an autocrat. Doesn't care what Congress says, doesn't care what the Supreme Court says. He's dismissive of both, insults both. We've never seen this before from any president of any party. And he's the kind of person that, we don't know what he's going to do tomorrow.
So I just thinking about the war itself as a a good American. I want us to prevail. I want it to not be a complete wasted effort. I don't want Americans to die. I don't want a bunch of Iranian civilians to die.
Hmm.
Our fight is not with them. At the same time, I want this unprovoked, ridiculous action to hurt Trump politically. So that's and I don't want us to be defeated, but it was a stupid thing for Trump to have started to continue to
Yeah, I can understand Israel's uh, initiative, and I think it was Israel that was that took out the um, Ayatollah and his the people that were advising him, and um, uh, they have the intelligence that can make their strikes um, more effective. But the rationale for the U.S. getting in, I think the same thing of what we're doing in Venezuela was about the oil. It's probably about the oil in Iran, but it's a folly because we're not going to seize Iranian assets. We're not going to get oil cheaper because they're afraid of us now. So that whole aspect of what do we gain from this? What do we get out of this? But you mentioned some sort of accountability, and Trump has dodged accountability all his life. Declared bankruptcy, was it 6 times?
it depends on what you count as bankruptcy, 4 to 6 times.
Okay, and convicted of over 30 felonies.
Oh, well, tax fraud. Under He has a deal. A lot of people do it. He just does it, and it's not legal when other people do it too. He's just done it to an amazing extent, which is overvaluing properties when you're using them as collateral for loans, undervaluing them for tax purposes. That the New York Times did an analysis, and when Trump's dad died, they undervalued what he passed on to Trump and the rest of the family to avoid $450 million in inheritance taxes.
Right.
Which is part of an overall $1.5 billion total, roughly, in Trump and family dodging legitimate debts to workers, to contractors,
Right.
defaulting on loans. The family they're America's biggest deadbeats.
And one of the things that initially offended me the most when Trump was just in New York, is he would hire contractors and labor to do a job, and then he wouldn't pay them, and they would sue him, and he would countersue and say, it wasn't up to the specifications and it didn't meet what my criteria was, and he would exhaust them in the legal system. They would get a ruling.
Yeah, Trump has been involved in 5,000 lawsuits. Now,
Isn't
most of them, probably over half, were when he owned casinos. He was suing gamblers who didn't repay the lines of credit that they drew in the casino. But still, that leaves thousands of other lawsuits.
Right.
And once he hired a bunch of Polish construction workers to work on a building conversion, and when they were done, I think he tried to get them in immigration trouble so he didn't have to pay them.
And what a model citizen.
So I was thinking in general that the Democrats have allowed themselves to be played for 50 years. It's the failure of decency as a political tactic that, the famous quote from Mrs. Obama, when they go low, we go high. Well, that has failed numerous times. The entire Biden administration, They were very quiet compared to Trump, who's out there every day bashing his enemies. Biden, uh, who's an institutionalist. Biden had 20 more years experience in national politics than any other president. So he believes in political institutions. He believes in good order. And he believed that if you just do the right thing, if you work hard, if you try to work for Americans, that Americans will find that and turn to you. And that is that lets you get played.
Yeah, unfortunately, Trump appeals to our worst instincts, and they're fear-based, and so you can scare people, and so that there are rapists and what have you coming over in masses from the southern borders, and so you can be afraid. And fear is a powerful motivator, and he got a lot of people around that issue. And also, he's a bully. Teddy Roosevelt once said that the presidency is a bully pulpit, but in those days he meant bully and as a
bully for you, bully
for you.
Hurrah pulpit.
Yeah. And Trump is using it as a bully pulpit, the way you would think in a grade school, kindergarten kind of a way, where the bigger guy beats up on the smaller guy. And that's not what I think this country has stood for 2.5 centuries.
Yeah, but we fool ourselves into thinking that that's all we stand for. Out of World War II, World War II was a very unusual war in that one side was extremely evil. The Nazis were evil as heck. The fascists were evil. They murdered above and beyond. I mean, 35, 40 million people died in World War II. 11 million of those people were straight up murdered by Hitler. And so when we conquered Hitler, and the Japanese were pretty terrible too, and when we conquered them, we felt like it was a victory for the forces of good. And we told ourselves that we stood for good, but that has allowed us to get played. Jimmy Carter ran as a decent man who was an antidote to Watergate and endless Vietnam, and that he gave speeches like he wore a sweater in the Oval Office and told people to make sacrifices. Turn down the heat in the winter to 68 and just wear a sweater. And then Reagan came in and trounced him by pretty much calling Jimmy Carter a pussy.
Jimmy Carter was one of the most decent men we've ever had in office, and after his presidency was, made it crystal clear the guy was a humanitarian. But what you're saying is that was not politically effective.
Decency doesn't necessarily. You need stuff beyond decency. Obama kind of stood for decency and not being his nickname was No Drama Obama, and he because of his reluctance to get dirty politically, he often got played by the Republicans. And he was able to win because in 2008, the economy was crashing.
Right.
And he's a charming guy, youthful, energetic, looks good with his shirt off. I was looking at the history of the presidency, and we have each candidate is either a hero, JFK, war hero, good looking, great hair, or a loathsome political beast, LBJ, Nixon, who were like conniving, using all sorts of understood the levers of political power. LBJ famously would take meetings in the Oval Office while he was taking a shit as a power move. He'd have somebody come in to talk to LBJ. LBJ would be on the toilet just whooping away to show them that he had the power. That there's no decorum here. I'm just going to tell you what to do. And unfortunately, we've had three loathsome political beast elections in a row, and it bums us out. 2016, Hillary, huge negatives, versus Trump, huge negatives. 2020, same thing. 2024, okay, maybe Harris is a breath of fresh air, but no, because she was appointed and the candidate because the old loathsome political beast, the old guy, couldn't do it. And so it was, again, beast versus beast. We haven't had a charismatic without that you could rally around since Obama. And the last time he ran was 2012.
Right. Well, again, Biden was a decent man and believed in institutions, as you say, and we've lost trust in all of our institutions at this point. But I'm sad to say this, but if he had resigned and allowed Harris to become president, or gotten out and let her run in the primaries so that she could have been tested.
Yeah, she may not have even won the primaries. Somebody else, Josh Shapiro, could have, maybe Newsom. Newsom has some of Trump's. Newsom is imitating Trump in political messaging, and it has given him a very early, lead among potential Democratic candidates for 2028. But for 2026, I'm not even seeing the vicious political advertising that they could do messaging that, a political action committee said, Trump was a child rapist and everything he does is to cover it up. And maybe the Trump would he'd say he'd sue him, and maybe he would, and maybe the ads would have to be pulled down. But they could say, Trump, he fucked up America in 2020, and you reelected him, and he's doing it again. I don't see any of that messaging.
Well, that's a great point. In that, I totally agree in my individual life when they go low, go high. But what you're pointing out, and which I'm coming reluctantly to agree, is that when you're in a knife fight, there's no rules. And Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid comes to mind there. But
this is a pet peeve I've recently on TV. I've noticed, my wife and I watch a lot of scripted TV, and a mistake that people who should know better consistently make is a gun is for standing 6 feet away and threatening somebody. Always on TV, like somebody who should know better gets within 2 feet of a bad guy with a gun, and that gun gets grabbed, and then they get a knife. You need to do it up close and personal. A gun is for standing far enough away that your gun can't get taken away from you.
Yeah. There was this excellent show, Justified. The Oliphant, and they had like a 20-foot rule. It was like, if you had a gun 20 feet away, that was threatening enough.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. Well,
inside that, somebody could charge you before you could get the gun out.
That's right. So Justified was initially the creation of Elmore Leonard, who is one of our greatest crime novelists. And he understood, because he started off writing pulp westerns. He wrote forever and, wrote like 50 books, and understood the rules and the dynamics of both, writing crime and the actual psychology. So, a number of great movies were made out of his stuff. Get Shorty, the one with Clooney and Jennifer Lope, is it?
Lopez?
Anyway, I forget, but and he was such a smooth writer by the last couple decades of um, of his writing. His books had very little violence in them because he understood how things work. That it was set up, set up, set up, set up, set up, and the violence happens in like half a page, and it's conclusive. It's not like a fight that goes on for
Right.
it's like somebody has the advantage, they use it, somebody ends up dead, boom, that's it. And
Yeah.
if you like mayhem, not so satisfying. But if you like well written stuff that makes like narrative sense, his stuff is great.
Right. Right. So this is in a way a reflection back in our society where it seems like if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead, and mayhem seems to be what the public eats up rather than good narrative. Like,
Well,
it's like they don't have the attention span to listen to the facts and to make their own conclusions. So it's like if you see a clip of Trump talking tough, they think he's tough. And, this is how many deferments did he get? Bone spurs?
5.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
So the political rule is that well over half of voters aren't paying attention. They kind of start paying attention maybe within a month of an election. Before then, you and we talk every week, and we go on Pod TV, and we talk every day, and I'm on X and getting worked up about shit all the time. We're unusual. We are loudmouths, and we're aware of stuff. We're the loud, semi-lunatic minority. Now, voters will start paying attention. Gas jumped up another 7 cents a gallon for a nationwide average of $3.79 now. It's gone up every day of the war. So we'll be at $4 a gallon, certainly by the end of March, probably within a week. And then we'll have knock-on effects of groceries and stuff.
right.
So people will pay attention to that. And for that, we should be grateful to Trump for making this enormous political mistake.
Yes. In the sense that, I think last week you told me about the employment numbers, and instead of adding jobs, we're actually losing them. It was one thing to be adding jobs at a slower rate, but in February we actually lost jobs. And so, we're getting, we're getting a squeeze on Main Street. Retail is losing out to online, and so stores are shuttering their windows. Restaurants are feeling the pinch. I was at one of our favorite restaurants, and I was asking the owner how business was since the pandemic, and she said dinner time has come back, but the offices are empty, so I don't get the lunch traffic.
So I saw for the first time in history this crazy statistic that the square footage of businesses in America devoted to selling stuff, to retail, selling actual items, is now less than the square footage devoted to services. That is restaurants, spas, gyms, the businesses where a person has to take their body physically someplace to get something. You need to eat. You can't order a workout over the internet. But retail,
or you would do it if you could. You would.
Retail has been killed,
Yes.
and the street crime is down 50% since the 90s. One reason, a major reason, is because people aren't on the street. If you want to do crime against people, you got to hit them where they live, which is online.
And also the burglaries. There's been alarming rates of home entry burglaries where people have gotten the technology to cut glass without making noise. And so they're entering buildings sometimes when people are still in the buildings, in the homes rather. And
if you want to rip off a celebrity, you look at their social media, and you find out when they're not home. Like athletes, pro athletes, their schedule is available to everybody, and
Right.
so when they have an away game, that's when you break in.
Right. Right. So some of the
So
people.
to go back to jobs,
Yeah.
jobs were right at the end of Biden. There was a huge drop off. Biden was averaging more than 200,000 jobs added per month for the first 3 years, and well more than that. Like I think the first year he added 6 million jobs. A lot of those were jobs that were coming back after COVID. But then, so 6 million year one, more than 2 million year two and three. By year four, it was down to a little under 1.5 million. Still much better than Trump, but a lot of that decline and the long-term decline is AI eating
Absolutely.
jobs. And people ignore that politically. Instead of saying that tech is eating jobs and also replacing good jobs with shitty jobs like Uber, they attack the political opposition. So a lot of this job decline is inevitable due to tech. And maybe we'll get some jobs back as we learn to adjust to tech. Maybe not. But we have a legitimately pissed off and nervous population. The people talk about, the people voted for Trump because of economic uncertainty. Well, there's a ton of economic uncertainty, and it's dumb to vote for Trump because of that. But it's a real thing, and that people are slow to acknowledge that tech is reshaping shit. People have predicted it for 100 years, and it's happening right now.
It's happening, and the rate is accelerating, the rate of change, because AI is getting more and more sophisticated, and businesses are learning how to use it more and more effectively. And so Meta just announced, I can't remember the number, but it was a large number, 2,000 something layoffs. And, these are the companies that used to employ people. And these were white collar jobs. These weren't the kind of jobs that were physically demanding. These were the kind of jobs.
These are good jobs that pay 200 grand and more a year.
Well-paying jobs, yes. And
6, 7, 8 years ago, people were told that the only way to be safe from tech is to learn how to code.
Mm-hmm.
And now AI is better at coding than more than 90% of coders. And right. So it's become one of the least safe jobs.
Right.
And also, Cory Doctorow brings up the point that AI doesn't have to do your job as well as you do. It's just that the people selling AI just have to be able to convince your boss that AI is good enough, which it often isn't. AI often needs babysitting. AI often makes harder to find mistakes because it is so good that when it makes a mistake, you're lulled into thinking that it's good, and it's harder to find. When you're doing your own coding, you will catch more of your mistakes than if you're looking at some 12,000 lines of code generated by AI.
Absolutely. It was always easier. And, we used to say to document that because someone else would pick up the program you had written. And so without the documentation, it was almost impossible for them to figure out what the problem was. But, we also had beta testing and a lot of things that went in before it would go into production. And with AI, there's this trust that it'll give you a good product. But also it doesn't call in sick, and it doesn't need benefits. And so a lot of company management is looking at the cost, the expense saving, the revenues. The revenues hopefully stay the same, and you're cutting expenses. That's a better return on investment for them and their shareholders. And so again, we're just on the cusp of this because companies are just now figuring out how to use it effectively. And they will learn more and more as AI gets better and better. Companies will learn more and more how to utilize it. And so these good, well-paying jobs, if they don't completely go away, they will be at a premium, and you will be competing with people with experience and a lot of backgrounds and been successful in their past for those scant jobs. So I think this generation is growing up with the idea that their future is not brighter but dimmer, as opposed to us growing up with the expectation that things were going to get better.
So
And
things are getting better in a lot of ways. There are a ton of now in the U.S. We're kind of fucked because Trump has pulled tens of billions of dollars out of medical
we,
research, and
yes,
so we're losing years of research. But overall, AI is facilitating a ton of medical discoveries. But that's a positive thing. But the negative thing,
of course,
because AI is eating good jobs, college enrollment in the U.S. is down 15% in the past 15 years because people are failing to see the bump that you used to get from having
yeah,
a degree.
right,
It's impacting men more than women. Colleges are now 60-40 women,
right,
which I think means that guys should go to college because I mean one of the reasons I like being at college is maybe I could get a girlfriend.
yeah,
And 60-40 is that's a great ratio,
yeah,
regardless of whether I end up with a decent job at the end of it.
yeah, yeah. And that although you appealed to me because I got my first serious girlfriend in college, and it was because we were co-ed dorms. And my freshman year I was in a all male dorm, and it wasn't until I got in a co-ed dorm that I started, and it was because you spent a lot of time with them,
Yeah,
and you know,
and so we
and
have
for
a
someone like
baby.
me, I needed them to get to know me.
Well,
My
no,
first
that's
impression was not necessarily the best.
familiarity. I mean, there's something to be said to the art of being a pickup artistry. You meet somebody and quickly like close the deal, but that takes like tremendous social skills that
Mhm.
I lacked, and
Yeah,
certainly that Gen Z lacks.
yeah.
And then the other way to go is through familiarity, that you interact with enough people enough that you get to see what makes somebody tolerable. And you get to see what makes other people on your floor in the dorm insufferable a-holes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you need some a-holes around so you look better in comparison.
absolutely.
But we have a baby shortage. We're making fewer than 80% of the babies we need in the US to maintain a stable population.
Well,
Our
that's true in
population,
China and Japan as well. I mean, that's
yeah, it's even
even
worse in other
even
countries,
worse. Yeah,
most countries.
yeah.
And if it weren't for immigration, the US population would be declining. But
And the immigrants are doing the jobs that we don't want to do and starting the businesses that we wouldn't have started anyways.
so
The
Sasha, a guy we know
yeah,
from other pod TV
lives in
shows,
Toronto. Yep.
yeah, he says we should reinstitute the draft, which is, I understand his point. It's a horrible idea because Trump is talking about the draft, because Trump talks out of his ass all the time, but that we would need a military draft would be bad. But the idea that everybody would have to, in their 20s, would have to do a year or 18 months of public service would be a great idea because Gen Z is all up on their tech, on their phones all the time, bad person-to-person social skills. If young people were forced to engage in group activities to help America, a lot of them would hook up. They'd meet each other and they'd find out the pleasure of interacting with people in person and maybe making out with those people. But that's unlikely to happen.
Yeah, I agree. But the other thing that we have to remind ourselves is that our voice can still be heard at the voting polls. But what do you think about the Trump's efforts to suppress the vote? For example, the
So, I mean,
SAVE
so
Act.
the Save Act or the Save America Act is garbage because, as anybody who pays any attention, which is again not, a small percentage of Americans, there's no significant amount of voter fraud. And I'm not even talking about under 1%. I'm talking about well under 1/5,000th of 1%. The Heritage Foundation maintains the super evil conservative organization that's dismantling America, has a thing called the Election Integrity Project, and it has a database where it has every documented instance of voter fraud in the United States this century across a base of 2,000 votes, 2 billion of total votes cast. There have been 2,000 fraudulently cast votes, which is a rate of 1 in a million.
And it's
Which
not enough to swing an election one way or the other.
never, even there was a huge amount of hanky panky in 1960 between Nixon and Kennedy for president in Chicago, and they've done an analysis like there were political machines. When we talk about a machine, we talk about the mayor and his allies, like running politics. And they did commit hanky panky with the vote. Even then, when it was huge and blatant, they've done an analysis. It wasn't enough to flip the election, even locally. And that was like a rare instance of, a big chunk of fraud. And
so it's much ado about nothing, but it can be used to suppress votes. And they're trying to do away with vote by mail as well, which I've used for decades now. I do recall the last time I went to a poll, but I went to vote in person. But I've been voting by mail for a long time. And I like it because I can sit and study what I'm doing. And I could do that and then go vote. But it seems to me the more comfortable, and I guess I would procrastinate if I was going to go vote, and then I would not do the research, and but being able to vote at home has given me the opportunity to talk to my wife and also to get alignment about what we value and those types of things. So there's a lot of benefits of voting by mail.
And we're both in California. California has the proposition system.
Yes.
But right now it's petition season. If you go out in public to the grocery store or the gym, there might be a couple guys in front of the gym saying, "You want to sign this petition?" And they've got a stack of 6 or 8 of them. And if you have time, you're like, "Well, tell me about each of these." And if this petition gets enough signatures, it goes on the ballot. Right. And then you get this thick ass ballot. And if you vote and you have to sit down for these propositions because often the language is deceptive.
Very confusing. Yes. Deceptive.
And so if you vote by mail, you can sit down. If you still subscribe to the newspaper, you can go to the newspaper and they'll have an election guide where they explain each proposition. Or you can just go online and look, and you can take a half hour and make sure that you understand everything that you're voting for and who you're voting for, like county commissioners or local judges. Like, I don't know who any of these people are, and I can either not vote for them or I can go online and read about them.
Right.
And voting by mail isn't just, there are protections built in. Like, first of all, voter fraud is a low reward, high risk activity. So people just naturally don't do it because the penalties already in place. You can go to prison for 3, 4, 5 years for trying to cast a vote fraudulently, even by mistake. There's a lady sitting in prison in Texas because she got out of prison. And then she goes to her local election people and says, "I'm out. Can I vote? I want to vote." And they're like, "Yeah, you're fine." 2 people told her this. They were wrong. She had not regained her right to vote. She cast her vote, thrown back in the can for 3 years. So illegal immigrants do not vote for the, and they have, out of 2 billion votes, they have 77 instances over the past 20 plus years of immigrants trying to vote. They just, for the most part, don't do it. I say this a lot, but in California, if you see somebody driving under the speed limit, there's a fair chance that they're a Mexican who does not have a green card because they don't want to get caught and deported. Same thing for voting. Why would you've built a life here. You're not documented, but you've gotten a job. You've got your families here. Why would you risk it all going away by trying to vote? It doesn't happen.
Right. And yet the Trump has used that to frighten so many people, so that it looks like these voter suppression things are going to pass into law.
Maybe. I just read a tweet this morning that said that the SAVE Act is designed to be defeated, and this will give Trump the excuse to deny the election results or to further fiddle with the election, saying, we could have had, protected elections where we were sure that the vote wasn't fraudulent. But if it doesn't pass, and Trump can say, well, there was massive fraud, which he would say anyway. If he's going to lose, he's going to lose a bunch of seats in the House.
Yeah,
there's a chance he loses the Senate.
Even that the Senate is in play is mind-boggling. Even if I go back to 2024, you looked at the House as a possibility, and the Senate is improbable.
There was a 16% chance. Now that chance is up over 40%.
Right.
And give it another month, if the war continues for a month, if gas gets over $4.50, by May, and then inflation, which is right now, core inflation's over 3%. If it goes to 4%, those are these are numbers that got Biden in trouble. So before the war, the House was projected for the Republicans to lose 28 seats. Now people are talking numbers of over 40 seats, and they can only afford to lose 2 seats without losing the majority. So they will definitely lose the House. And
right. Yeah, and having just the House will slow down Trump's agenda. But if he just says, okay, I'm going to ignore Congress, I'm actually going to cancel the elections. And what are you going to do? Who's going to stay you can't do that?
Well, the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court only has 2 crazy people on it.
Right.
The Supreme Court has 3 libs, 6 conservatives. 2 of the conservatives are crazy a-holes, Alito and Thomas, and they'll vote with Trump just about every time. Right. But that's 7 other people who quite a bit of the time do the right thing.
Right.
Amy Coney Barrett was named to the court to get rid of Roe v. Wade, to get rid of abortion.
Right.
And she did that. But outside of issues like that, she, I believe, is a good justice. Gorsuch, kind of a right-wing hack, but often does the right thing. Kavanaugh, same deal, some unsavory things in his past, and maybe not the greatest demeanor. Chief Justice Roberts, often they've made some horrible decisions. The Citizens United, but Absolutely. On any given, as long as it doesn't fall into their personal, black hole of they will often do the right thing. And for something as important as elections, I think they would, except for Alito and Thomas, I think they would stand against Trump.
Okay. But I think it would come down to the military having to disobey an illegal order. Uh,
So we've talked about, Hegseth, utterly unqualified, never ranked higher than major. And he's a war planner. If you look at D-Day, the generals, 4 and 5, the equivalent of 4 and 5 star generals, planned D-Day. And it worked pretty well. There were some screw ups. Omaha Beach, they weren't supposed to land where they landed, and a bunch of people got slaughtered. But overall, they mounted an expeditionary force, and they shut down Germany in less than a year. They marched across Europe and took down the Nazis. Hegseth, a major is 6 ranks below a 4-star general. It goes major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. He was, majors are not meant, trained to be war planners. And Trump, of course, wildly inexperienced militarily, and I'm sure they have, they have great generals and a great military under them. But it's not the general's job to disagree with the orders. So things would have to get really bad for the military to stand against. Now it could happen. The head of Trump's counterterrorism task force just resigned today. I've been reading about him. I've never heard of him before. This Joe guy, a huge MAGA, Joe Kent. This is a guy who served 11 tours overseas as a Green Beret, the toughest of the tough. He's right. What they call a Gold Star husband. His wife was killed in battle or killed in war, and she was deployed too. Now he's also a white nationalist a-hole, so there's a lot not to like about him. What to like about him is that today he sent a scathing letter of resignation saying that Iran was not a threat to us, that the war is bullshit, and he quit. So it is possible for people to stand up to him, but shit would have to be even more dire than it is now.
Yeah, and that's not out of the question, because again, I would say that there's nothing that I could put past Trump, and the only thing we can do is raise our voices and express our displeasure. And so I want people to feel empowered to raise their voice and not afraid of the repercussions that are more in your worst scenario kind of imagination rather than the reality of what you'd face, because there's so many of us that disapprove of what's going on and no longer recognize the country because of what it has become in the hands of a single individual.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. The extension of the executive branch is well beyond what was established. You mentioned Citizens United. We the people did not mean corporations. So these types of things have got to change. But there's also the problem that there are many billionaires who like the way that things are going because they are making more billions.
Well, they have mixed feelings. I would say that they maybe don't like the political landscape, but when you have $42 billion, your experience, your daily experience is based on you having a ton of money and doing rich people stuff.
Right.
When you don't buy groceries, you have people to buy groceries for you. Nobody, and are the people who buy you groceries are not gonna, you don't necessarily even see them. They just end up in your pantry. You're not going to have somebody come back from a grocery trip and go, "Hey, billionaire, you can't believe how much cheese was today."
Yeah.
So they make.
And your driver isn't going to complain about gas prices to you. Yeah.
Right. So, but making the easiest way to make your voice heard might get less easy, which is with your vote. And we hear this before every election, and I'm lazy about it. My wife does so much of the logistical stuff. It's like, I can't compare myself to Einstein, but I'm gonna. Einstein's second wife um, did all the household shit so Einstein could walk around in a fog, right? Just thinking all the time. And I'm a lot spoiled that way, where my wife does a lot of almost all of the logistical shit. Now, I'll wire stuff. Our front light, is on a timer, and the timer burned out, and I was able to wire it. But have you ever tried to program one of those things
Right.
yourself?
It's yeah. Yeah.
So
I
my
would need
wife
my niece to help me.
So I wired it. I got it so it has electricity in it. But my
Oh,
wife
good
has
for
been
you.
trying to program it for weeks and finally got it to work. Anyway, my wife handles the voting logistics, make sure that we're registered, that we get our vote by mail ballots. And Trump is, going to try to make it harder. And you should do a little bit more work this time around. Make sure you're registered. Make sure your address is correct. Make sure if the law does change that you have the necessary ID. It's a little bit more work to make sure that we don't get another 2 years of Trump with unbridled power.
Amen to that. So, Rick, I'm going to wrap up. That was a good ending for this show. There's so much to roar about now, and do all those things to prepare yourself to be able to vote so that your vote matters. Your vote counts. It does matter, because the idea is that what's good about this country can fix what's wrong with this country. And the ability of the citizens to say, we are on a wrong path. And this is not
Don't give up on America. I see a
right.
lot of tweets that say, "Well, is this the end of the American empire?" And
Right.
is this the experience? No, don't give up on America. We've got one shitty president,
Right.
and unfortunately, we got him twice. And it's, I mean, if you look at the presidents we've had during our lifetime, we've had more than our share of crap presidents. Um, but it doesn't mean the end of frickin' America.
Well, one of the things that, regardless if they were Republican or Democratic, they hired professionals to around them, and they listened to the professionals, and that's the main difference between Trump and any other president who, even if we think that they were bad for one reason or another, is that he only listens to a very few people who tell him what he wants to hear.
Right.
And
We've had very few geniuses as president. Teddy Roosevelt, frickin' genius, wrote 49 books.
yeah.
But beyond him, you could argue nobody was a frickin' genius. And it is exactly that you pick a good group of people around you. And that's the trouble with Trump. Trump, an idiot surrounded by idiots.
Amateurs. Yeah, they don't know what they're doing. And so it's no wonder that we're finding ourselves in these difficulties. And the stock market today and yesterday are trying to shrug things off. But eventually, these oil prices are going to remain high, and they're going to realize that these price changes, these increases in prices, are here to stay.
Yeah. Well, the stock market likes political chaos because that means you can get away with. It's like, when do you throw a party? When your parents are out of town, in high school, right? And
yeah, but they can't do the planning that they typically do, because who knows what Trump is going to do tomorrow. So
right.
this is going to catch up with the markets as well. So thanks again, Rick. Yeah,
all right. Sure.
I'm going to have to cut us off and
Okay.
say goodbye to you, and see you next week, I hope.
All right.
And
See you then. Thank you.
yeah, I appreciate it. Hang on just a second. I'm going to end the. Before I do that, I'm going to take us both off screen and roar once again.